this afternoon to learn a bit more about some exciting new concepts and initiatives that have the potential of bridging, if you will, the profit and the nonprofit sectors. The School of Public Affairs has long been a supporter of the nonprofit sector in our region. Our Master of Public Administration degree has a concentration area in nonprofit management. And many of the nonprofit organizations that you are familiar with in this region are led by our graduates. We're kind of proud of that. We are. And we're committed to building what is, we believe, is an essential element of a strong civil society. Great communities have a strong nonprofit sector and well-run nonprofit organizations, and this is a great community. I don't think anybody would disagree with that. Now, increasingly, the profit margin alone is insufficient for many in the corporate sector. When the profit motive becomes unmoored, if you will, from a sense of meaning and purpose, the work is less fulfilling for those in corporations, and it can be potentially detrimental to our society overall. From another perspective, there is a strong business case to be made when companies have and provide social good beyond profit alone. Call it corporate social responsibility, conscious capitalism, the triple bottom line of people, profit, and planet. For our purposes this evening, we're going to be talking about social impact businesses. These are businesses that seek to have a positive social and environmental impact on our communities by harnessing the powerful engine of capitalism. There is nothing like capitalism to move productivity from a non-productive into a productivity area. That is to say that it can take non-productive things and point out their non-productivity very quickly and provide strong incentive to move that labor into more productive enterprises. Capitalism does that quite well. Now, there's a number of social impact businesses already in our community. You may have heard of some of them. Kids on Bikes, Who Gives a Scrap? I like that one. Blue Star Recyclers, Energy Resource Center, Goal Zero, Goodwill, Aspen Point Cafe, Mountain Equipment Recyclers, Common Cause Catering, just to name a few. It is you. We're proud of you. We're proud of you. The Better Business Bureau is also seeking to support social enterprise, and in combination with the Regional Business Alliance, they have formed the Colorado Coalition for Social Impact. The coalition is the only organization I know of, at least locally, that is specifically seeking to bolster social impact businesses. It's admittedly an emerging idea without clear definitions and guidelines. Unfortunately, currently, anyone can claim to be a social impact business, a situation that can be confusing to both consumers as well as businesses. Colorado Springs is a well-intentioned town. It's uniquely positioned to do good, in part because we have a large base of effective nonprofits, and we also have strong business minds that support innovation and evolution of these new and exciting ideas. So it's my pleasure now to introduce to you someone who's been operating at the leading edge of this idea. He's a friend of UCCS and the School of Public Affairs. He's also a person in Colorado Springs who is really and sincerely making a difference. Please welcome Jonathan Liebert, CEO and Executive Director of the Better Business Bureau of Southern Colorado. Jonathan.
George, I think you did such a fantastic job of kind of introducing the subject. I think I can just go home now. You've got it covered. That's fantastic.
Steal all your thunder?
No, not at all. I was telling Stacy, he's like, this is great. He did a fantastic just kind of overview of really kind of what this is and why this is important. And I think tonight what we want to really talk about is, number one, what's going on here in our local community. What's also going on at the national level. But more importantly, why is this important? And why do not only businesses, but also nonprofits really need to make sure they're paying attention to this, because there's a lot of things that are going on right now. Some of which some of you may be aware about. And most of the places that I go to and talk to, a lot of folks just have not heard a whole lot of this. So hopefully we'll have some good conversation tonight. But the first thing I wanted to kind of cover is why BBB? Why is BBB interested in doing this? And also SBDC in that regard. And what I'll tell you is this, is that for the past year, we've been getting a lot of different questions from nonprofits, from businesses, from people just in general that are kind of asking the question about, how do I start a social enterprise? How do I start a social business? Where do I go? And so they go to the Center for Nonprofit Excellence, ask them that question. They'll say, well, I don't really know. They'll come to BBB, they'll go to SBDC, they'll go to the Regional Business Alliance, they'll go to all these places and they'll ask these questions and they say, well, you can kind of talk to this organization. We'll do a little bit of this. Go talk to that person over there. I think they've done this before. But really, there's no place where anybody can come together, have all this information in one place, and really kind of learn about what this is, what this isn't, what are some of the lessons learned from experts in the field, and really what's going on in terms of creating a culture, creating a dynamic within our community to really push this model forward. So BBB said, you know what, this is something we want to get into. We want to get into this method of doing this. We want to get ahead of the curve. Because here's what we kind of foresee, and 2 weeks ago I was saying, the what if this happens. Now, unfortunately, today I'm telling you that this has happened. It's only going to take a matter of time. It has happened, and it happened in Colorado Springs, for a business to take advantage of the name or the business model or just doing good in the community and then not following through on their promise. And so BBB, this is what we do, we're a consumer protection agency. We also want to make sure that we're pulling up and holding up those businesses that are doing things well and make them the example and have other people emulate them. And the people that are not doing a good job, we want to call them out and hopefully not have those businesses be part of our community. So I'll give you the example because this happened just the other day. There is a company that they're headquartered here in Colorado Springs. It's just a P.O. box, it's one of those companies. So I don't think they actually do a whole lot of business here, but they're headquartered out of Colorado Springs. And they are a company that produces, you may have seen this commercial on Facebook or on the internet, but it's these huge nylon bags. And what you do is you kind of go like this and you grab all this air and you roll up really quick and you can sit on them on the beach or they have people float around in the pool. But it's like this big kind of self-inflatable bed. And what they'll tell you is they'll say, you guys, if you want to buy these products, then pay $79 and we'll ship you one. And number one, they're having issues with fulfilling those orders. There's about 409 complaints on Facebook right now on their page. Of people saying, you didn't fulfill my order, I didn't get the product, I didn't get this, didn't get that. And their response is, well, because of growing pains, we're having these issues. And so B is getting a lot of complaints, we're hearing a lot of issues about this company. That's not all, we get those types of things every day. But they've also done, as they said, for $79 you can get that product. But if you spend an extra $29, we partner with these nonprofits, and we're going to donate one of these beds to these nonprofits to use for special populations, specifically with homeless shelters. So if you buy this product for an extra $29, we'll ship you one, and we'll ship one to this nonprofit, and homeless people won't have to sleep on the ground anymore, right? Sounds like a great deal. We called all those nonprofits, and they've never heard of this organization. They don't have any of these deals, and they have not shipped any of those products to any of the homeless shelters that they talked about. And the point I'm trying to make is nobody's checking, nobody's making sure that they're doing this. So nobody was complaining about the fact that these homeless shelters weren't getting these beds. People were complaining about getting the beds that they had ordered. And so what you see here is just an example. They weren't calling themselves a social enterprise. They weren't saying they're a social business. They were just kind of doing more of this cause marketing type of thing, this cause marketing effect where, hey, buy this product and we're going to do something good. Nobody checked on it. BBB wants to get ahead of that. We want to do more in our community to make sure we're protecting consumers from those types of things, but also educating people on the positive benefits of what this is and what this looks like. And so through those two things, giving best practices to people, but also making sure consumers are protected against folks that might use this for just kind of personal gain and not following through on their promises. We don't make sure we're doing that. So that's why we started this process. That's why we got involved in this, to give examples of good best practices for businesses and also make sure we're educating consumers. And just as an aside, this is now a national strategic goal for BBB. So the national BBB will be providing some sort of accreditation or certification in this business model within the near future, probably within the next 6 months to a year. We'll be doing this and rolling this out on a national level. So you'll be hearing more about this from BBB specifically in the future. But why are we having this conversation tonight? Why is this important? And what I'd like to tell people is it's time for a new vision. Business is changing. The economy is changing. The recent financial struggles that we've had and the recession has left all of us, I hope, a little bit smarter in terms of how we spend our money and where these products or services come from. And I think that's what you'll see with some of this. So I mentioned already, the economic rules are changing. Things are different. Consumers are more informed and conscious about where they spend their money. People want to know if they're going to go buy a product or service, well, can I get something that's going to impact my own personal community? We've all heard people really want to make sure they're supporting small business. Impact things at the local level. There's a lot of value in that. That creates a lot of good economic vitality for our local communities. It also helps to employ people here at the local level. Keep that money here is definitely important. But people are more aware of what's going on from a social standpoint and also from that environmental standpoint. You've kind of heard more about the environmental for many, many years. Now you're going to hear more, you're already hearing it now, but you're going to hear more in the coming years about what can you do to impact social populations. Consumers want to know how businesses are positively impacting their local communities. They want to make sure that they're doing good with their money. They're not just coming in here, taking your money, and shipping it off. On average, typically if you go and purchase food from a franchise, as an example, 80% of that money typically leaves the community where that franchise is located. It goes back somewhere else, like we have somewhere. Some of that money stays here for the rent and the utilities and some of the salaries, but a lot of that money leaves this area right away. So when you impact things at a local level, you're keeping more of that money here, as I mentioned. And the research suggests that both corporate and university levels, that this next generation of employees, this next generation of consumers, many of you who are sitting here tonight are going to change this paradigm, already changing the way that people think about this in terms of how you buy, what you purchase, what influences your purchasing decisions, and what companies you want to go work for. So that's what's really important, I think, about a lot of this. And I have a slide on here that I'll talk about here in a little bit that kind of talks about some of the research of that. So the point is, everything's up for grabs. There's something called disruptive innovation that many of you have heard of. Uber is a really good example of a company coming in and just really taking a whole new crack at an entirely established agency and industry and doing something totally new and different with it. And at this point, everything is up for grabs. In this sector of the economy, this is a new sector, I like to tell people that you're not likely to see the birth of a new sector of the economy again in your lifetime. We're talking about the fourth sector of the economy, the social impact sector, whatever you want to call it. But it's a sector that's made up of these hybrid businesses of mission and margin, combining both of these to create more value for our communities. And because more and more people are interested in what these businesses are doing, we're seeing profits going towards these businesses. We're seeing employees going towards these businesses. And millennials specifically are looking to work for businesses that have a higher purpose. And in many cases, folks will take a lower paycheck to go work for those businesses that have more value and add more to their communities. So for CCSI, this is what we're trying to do here in Colorado Springs. We're trying to create, obviously, more awareness of what this is, but we're trying to help and promote and build these businesses that are interested in generating social impact. So we're trying to take people from scratch and have them get the resources that are necessary to do this. And we're also having people that are kind of right in the middle of that stage. They want to kind of scale up or do something different. They want to pivot, do something a little bit, different from the original business model that they have. We also want to work with people that are already doing this. They already have maybe just a traditional for-profit or a traditional nonprofit, and they want to convert. They want to add this to their business model. So there's lots of people that we have that want to help do this. Help people get these resources and training. That could be access potentially to some funds. Right now, a lot of it's going to be more access to educational information. How do we do trainings? How do we provide mentors to a lot of folks? There are some smart people that are in this community that have done this already. And you're going to meet a couple of those tonight, and they're going to kind of tell you some of their stories and some of the lessons learned from their perspective. And really making sure that people are set up for success. This model works really, really well when it's kind of off and running, but I would be lying if I didn't tell you, as a practitioner of this, and before I came to the Better Business Bureau, these business models are really, really hard to start and to run. One of the things that you heard earlier from Mr. Reed was that this is something that's essentially kind of the triple bottom line. This notion of people, profit, plan, or mission, margin, and community. All of these things working together, they don't always work together harmoniously. Sometimes they kind of go right at it. But when you get these things and they get the balance to kind of really come together and really make sure these things are working in tandem, you get a very, very, very powerful business model that creates a lot of value for communities. And so we want to make sure we're promoting that, but also training people on this. I mentioned education, but as well, we want to create a community and a culture here in Colorado Springs. So creating events, creating trainings, creating the ability for people to come together to share ideas, to learn from one another. We've got a lot of things already in town. We're doing some cool things with pitch nights and those types of things. And so whether it's doing something that's similar in that regard, but it's specific to social impact, and we add on to what folks at like Big Startup are doing, or things that are SBDC or SBA or any of those organizations. How do we partner with folks and do more? But there will be some things that will be specific and unique to the sector. We're pulling more people in to provide more education, more information. And this one's very, very important because what we've got to do is make sure that we're measuring the impact of the sector. So right now, it's very easy for us to go and determine how many for-profits are there in the state, how many nonprofits are there. You can go and look at the websites and check this out. But if you were to try to find out how many social impact businesses are out there, there's no reporting tool or reporting mechanism that will tell you how many there are, and what their impact is on the local economy. This is what we want to try to measure, to bring more value to this so we can track the sector's progress and see more growth. So why is this important? These are some of the research I like to cite. So this one here, this is coming from Nielsen, talks about that more than half, 55% of global respondents on a survey talked about that as consumers, people would change a brand to a different one, or I'm sorry, they would pay extra money for a product or service if they thought it had some type of social benefit. And again, I think we see this a lot in some of the examples of other businesses that are out there. So people will pay more for a product or service. It doesn't have to be more necessarily. People will pay more for that product or service if they think it's going to do good. Patagonia is a good example of this, where from an outdoor product standpoint, there are a whole lot of them, and they're all really expensive, right? But a lot of people choose Patagonia not only because of the quality of the products that they have, but because a lot of the environmental outcomes that they try to produce, and a lot of some of just the sustainability that they're trying to create within that program with those products. Over there to the right in the green, you can see that if you look at price that's comparable, in addition to quality and customer service, so kind of all things being equal, people are going to switch brands to a different brand where that brand has some type of social heat to it. 90% is something that I think if you would have asked somebody in business school type of setting 10 years ago, they would have said, no way. Number one, nobody's going to pay more for that product. And no, they're not going to switch favorite brands to something that's different, that's new. They're going to stick with what they know because they trust it and they like it. And as I said in that second slide, this is all, the rules are changing, marketing is changing, business is changing. What we're witnessing here today is really the evolution of capitalism, if you really want to think about it. And where that will end up, I don't know. But we're seeing that change, we're seeing that shift. And it really is about how do you harness the power of that capital engine and harness that and do more good for communities. And again, this is a hybrid. This is taking kind of the best of a nonprofit mission, taking the best of the for-profit and the margin, how that works, and combining them together to create something that's a little bit different, moves quickly, that solves social problems, or it's a business with a higher purpose, where the business is not there just to do one thing and have one priority, strictly to make money. It's also to create impact, to create more value. And through that, there's research out there that shows some businesses are making a lot more money because they're doing more for local communities and also communities throughout the world. Last one here, I mentioned this already, is 6 out of 10 millennials said that a sense of purpose is a large part of the reason of why they would choose to work with their current employer. So I've been going out here just in Colorado Springs from the BBB perspective and telling local businesses, you need to pay attention to this. I'm not telling you need to convert, I'm not telling you need to do anything. This is not for everybody. It's not for everyone because it's not easy. It's not for everybody because it might not mesh with what your business model is. That's totally fine. So I want to make sure you're aware of this. Because number one, people are going to switch products potentially to one that has some type of social cause. But also, if you're having problems with your workforce, or you maybe in the future start to have some problems with your future workforce, you can't get people to come work for you, or they're not highly motivated, but they're going to your competitor, check to see if this is one of those things that they're doing that's a little bit different. And check to see if this is something that they're thinking about. So this is something I think that's important in terms of future workforce, but also future consumers. So here's what we're talking about. We're talking about what is social impact business and what the heck is all this stuff. There's a lot of different names for this. I've got some of them up here. These are the bigger ones that have more of a specific movement that are going on. But there's new ones I hear sometimes every other day, it seems, where somebody's calling something else, something different. It's just kind of a tweak. But for the purpose of what we're talking about, it's these here in the bottom that we're going to focus on. And this is just a continuum of looking at how these businesses work. So here in the green, we're talking about, a true nonprofit organization. This is more your traditional model of what a nonprofit would look like. And at the far end over there in the yellow is your traditional for-profit company. And so typically, those are the two major categories of businesses and organizations that you talk about, that you hear about. And what we're talking about when we talk about social impact is it's all these things in the middle. It's all these things here in blue. When we say social impact business, that's what we're talking about. Social impact business can mean social enterprise. A social impact business can mean a social business. It can mean conscious capitalism. It can mean public benefit corporation or certified B Corp. Just out of curiosity, because I always like to do this just so I can kind of gauge where the word's getting out. How many of you have heard of a social enterprise before? Just raise your hands really quickly. That's usually what you get, most of the room now. 3 years ago, maybe nobody. So it's already starting to change. How many of you heard of a social business before? A couple. This is usually what happens. Conscious capitalism. Okay. How about public benefit corporations, certified B Corps, etc. All right. So you guys are usually at that, you get to that point, nobody. So you guys are ahead of the curve, which is good. But this is really what we're talking about. So, social enterprise, this is a mission-driven business. This is something that is more closely akin on this line here. These can be a nonprofit or for-profit. So again, this is one of those things where people kind of get confused, because I've heard a lot of folks lately say, well, if you're going to be a social enterprise, it means you're a nonprofit. And that's not true. You can be either one. But that's where it does get confusing, because this, in essence, is a philosophy. It's a brand. It's really kind of how you define your business and how you build your business around this particular business model. So when you move here to the social business category next, that's really saying, where you say, look, this is a mission, a business that exists to solve a social mission. You got that mission up there. Now you got to have margin. You got to make money to be able to do this. But the mission is there. That's why you exist, is to solve that. When you combine this with the social business, it's saying, look, we're going to take this mission, we're going to take this social goal, and put those together. Typically, those are for-profits. Then you move another click to the right, conscious capitalism. Those are for-profits. Those are for-profits that are designed to build to make money. But what they will tell you is that they have a higher purpose. They're designed with a higher purpose in mind. It's not just to make profit and to maximize profit. The more money they make, they can invest it in other areas. But primarily, they're going to pay for their shareholders, investment of them. But they want to create more value to communities locally and abroad, and really create more value for them and have that higher purpose mission to get people excited to come and work for them. And I'll give you some examples here in a second. And then the last one is a public benefit corporation or benefit corporation. Here in Colorado, this is a legal entity. So if you want to go out there and start a business today, you could choose a nonprofit, you could choose a for-profit, or you could choose a public benefit corporation, which is a legal entity here in Colorado as of 2013. If you don't want to pursue that, there's something called, it's a certification program you can go through a company called B Labs. There's something, it's called it's a B corporation, certified B corporation. And there are some companies that do both. So I just got back from a trip in Utah. There's a new company out there called Cotopaxi, very similar to Patagonia in what they do. Very cool brand. They are a public benefit corporation in the state of Utah. They're also a certified public benefit corporation. So they got both. But again, this is a lot of stuff for people, and people are like, oh, this is different, this one's better, this one, nothing's better or worse. It just depends on what your business model is, and what we're trying to do is just educate the public on what these things are. So if any of you are interested in doing some extra reading, because I know you don't have enough students here at UCCS, I'm sure you want more. If you do want some more, I'm just saying, there's some stuff you can look at. This is a good one for social entrepreneur, social enterprise, Mission Inc. This has some good kind of how-to. There's actually a business plan outlined in there, how to do a business plan for a social enterprise. It's very, very good. Mohammed Guinness, those of you may have heard of him. He is the one who founded the Grameen Bank and invented microfinance. Won the Nobel Peace Prize a couple of years ago. And he's the one really kind of pushing this notion of social business and how these are more balanced than the social enterprise model. But again, social nonetheless in terms of what they're trying to do and how they're trying to create more value. Conscious capitalism is being pushed by John Mackey of Whole Foods and a lot of his friends that are Fortune 500 and 200 companies. And what they're saying is, again, and John Mackey will tell you, Whole Foods is a good example of this. What he'll say is that he'll tell you that, look, I know I'm in the business of selling groceries, but I'm not a grocer. That's not why I exist, is just to sell groceries. I exist because I want to solve poverty in third world countries. And I'm doing that through my business model of selling groceries. So I'm going to give people contracts that are, triple, what the standard might be. So you could get, so as a farmer in Guatemala, you get a contract for 10, 15 years if you do a good job and you do other things. What that's going to allow you to do is provide, number one, you have some, a sense of security in the regard of that you're going to have that contract now for a year or 2 years. So you're going to be able to put your kids through college or save up, be able to give, have more sense of being able to buy things for your family and do good. Also, hopefully what they're doing is that you're going to be more sustainable in how you actually farm that land. And so you're not going to take shortcuts. You're not going to do those types of things. So what he's hoping to do, now you pay more money for that, absolutely, right? But with the growth of Whole Foods alone, although I think Sprouts is going to run through the money, you're seeing in Trader Joe's, same type of thing. But Whole Foods has really done a lot to kind of promote this notion, and promote this idea. They've created a whole new industry around this that wasn't there. So they're a good example of a disruptive innovator that's come into a very, very old industry. And again, 10 years ago, you could never charge more product for that. I'm going to go to Sam's Club. I'm going to go to Costco, whoever. Costco is actually one of the businesses in that. And I'm going to buy this for less. That's all people are interested in. People are not interested in just paying for less. They want to know the product or service isn't destroying the environment. They also want to know that it's not taking advantage of children or anything else in that regard. So, oh, by the way, for those of you who are familiar with Jim Collins and the Good to Great companies, these conscious capitalists, and the research was done by Harvard, they outperform the Good to Great companies like 6 to 1 in terms of making money. So they provide huge value. Typically, they're very, very popular brands of people, and they make more money usually. And they'll invest that into their employees, they'll invest that into their communities, and they'll invest that back into some of those missions that they serve. The last one is just the B Corp. This is actually a very, very new book, just came out not too long ago. It talks about the certification process and how they're trying to get more states to kind of change this. And this last slide just talks about some of these companies here. You got Blue Star, which is a local company, Tom's Shoes, which is a one-for-one model. And again, we can go back and forth on the good that they've created and some of the bad that's kind of come with that. But they're always just kind of a good case study because they're so large, they grew so quickly. There's some unintended side effects that came from this. But again, they change. They change what they do. Minor equipment recyclers was also mentioned. And that's just outdoor gear with a greater cause where you take consignment stuff back and they'll give it to nonprofits and they start giving it to military nonprofits. Dan, your company, try to give that to young children to provide nourishment in a lot of different countries. Whole Foods, we talked about. New Belgium, up the street here, is actually, according to B Labs, one of the best companies in the world you can buy from because of what they do in terms of the products they serve, but also what they're doing for their employees, what they're doing for the community, and also what they're doing for just the environment in general. Patagonia, I mentioned them briefly as well in terms of what they do and how their mission works, and then Ben & Jerry's is just another example. So just again, these categories, just giving you some ideas of what this looks like. And then finally, this is the CCSI model, our phase approach. Phase 1, people that are new to this, we want to educate them, provide them value, provide them classes. Phase 2, if you kind of have an idea or you're getting ready to start one, plug in and engage with us. We can do a planning session, we can do a training plan. We have something called a roundtable. There's one coming up here in November, is it 3rd, Stacy? And then on the 3rd phase, receiving a mentor, potentially getting access to some funding too. And what we'll pass around here is there's a little business card. Stacy will help me pass these around. This is something you guys can all keep. On the back, it kind of lists the goals of what we do, but also right now, we're only on Facebook. We're getting ready to develop a website for all this. It's just kind of exploded. This program's only been around since like June, and there's already a lot of stuff going on with this. But if you want to go to the Facebook page like that, then you'll get all the upcoming events, some good articles on there. We post stuff with fresh content pretty regularly, so you can find out some more stuff about this. But that's all I have for the CCSI piece. I know we have some good panelists here we want to get to. Unless we have any questions?
Yeah, does anyone have any questions for Jonathan? Just about intro stuff?
Yes.
Yeah, I have a quick question. You talked a little bit about the big companies doing better with social impact businesses. Do you have any information about startups that are they outperforming the attrition rate for I don't want to say normal for-profits, but the traditional for-profits?
You know, right now, because there is kind of that lack of information and some data in the field, I mean, it's hard to say from a larger perspective what it looks like. And I think that's why, you know, even if it's Colorado Springs kind of leading the way in terms of what this is and tracking this information, getting this data from folks. Because again, if somebody doesn't self-identify as an organization that does this, and you've got people in this town that are doing this work and they don't even know that they're doing it. They don't even know what it's called. And you've got some older institutions like YMCA as an example. They're a social enterprise. I don't think they know it, but they're a social enterprise. BBB is no exception. We're not a social enterprise, but we are a social business in that regard because we have this mission of what we do in the field, but we pay for it through a business model of these accreditation. So I think that there's some information out there. I don't think it's enough to kind of create a whole lot of stir yet, but I think that's one of the goals that we have is to create more information, gather more data. We've talked a lot already with how can we work with UCCS some more and provide more opportunity to do some case studies, gather some research, do more publications, to put more information out there to the community. But then I think as we start to catalog, and we're creating a directory of folks here in town for this specifically, as we create that directory and actually track metrics from them and report on that on an annual basis, I think we'll get more people kind of coming in to contribute to this. And, you know, some communities are better than others. I know California has a lot of stuff. They've got some good leaders over there that are doing some good things for them. But, you know, I think there's a lot of them here in Colorado, and there's going to be a lot more, I think, that are going to be starting, because more and more people want to include this in what their business models are and how this works. But we want to make sure from the beginning, too, they're thinking about how do I contribute to the knowledge base of this and provide more information to what it is that's working well and what's not working well, and how do they differentiate between those models. So I think there's more to come. Anything else? We move to the panel. Yes, sir.
You know, we have all these different gradations, right, and titles for these different activities. For a long time, corporations have given money to stuff, right? I mean, any company in this area, I think we've tapped most of them as the University of Colorado for sponsorships for events and things like
Right.
that. And you go to the local banks, you say, I need $2,500 for this, and you know, they're generally pretty good about it.
Mm-hmm.
They give. What's the difference between that and some of this other things?
That's a really good question, and you know, you can see in the far slide in yellow over there, it does the CSR, that's corporate social responsibility. And what I tell people is that, you know, what we're seeing now is kind of the next step, that further evolution of what this is. And when we talk about these social impact businesses, you know, I'm not talking about, you know, corporate social responsibility, CSR, and those types of things. I think they'll still exist over there in those spectrums, but I think we'll probably still give money. But, you know, from companies that are going out there and marketing to people and saying, here's our corporate responsibility, we're going to give 1%. And that's kind of a good number for most businesses, and we'll give 1% of our profit to something. It's good, that's great, you know, we need that. But here's some other interesting research that just came out. This came out from the BBB Wise Giving Alliance, which is our national entity that monitors you know, kind of corporate stuff and nonprofits, etc. But they talk about those that when a recent survey was done of millennials, again, 70% of millennials are not going to change. Corporate social responsibility is not going to sway their buying decision to purchase from that. I think before you would see probably more of that. But now that you have the option to potentially buy from some of these organizations that are going to do it every single day, they're going to go buy from them. Because the question is, well, if I need to go buy some food or buy some shoes or buy something, I got to buy something anyways. Well, why wouldn't I just go buy it from this provider over here that already does it versus donate money to a foundation? Giving is down with the millennials again by about 49%. Doesn't mean millennials are bad people. They want to give money to nonprofits. It means that they can go buy it directly. They can go right away and purchase that product. And so I think the business model is changing a little bit too, where you have businesses that have a lot of money, make a lot of money. You make a lot of money like Bill Gates. Well, heck yeah, I'm going to start my foundation and then work on giving all this money away. I think that's still going to be there, but that even foundations are changing. Foundations are changing the way they give. Foundations, the progressive ones, are serving as banks, because right now you can't go through a traditional, you go through a traditional bank and get a loan for this. It's not going to work the way this business model is set up. It's not a good idea typically, because of the way the business cycle works. It's going to take you twice as long to kind of hit profitability, and you're not going to be able to pay that back in the same type of time frame, because you're going to take a lot of what your profits are. Normally they would kind of go to you or go to your shareholders, and typically you reinvest that back into the mission of why you started the business in the first place. So foundations are kind of filling the gap of, you know, doing recoverable grants, which are basically a low interest business loan. So those models are all changing, but the 1% that people will give, I think they'll still give, but again, it won't probably carry as much clout as it used to. Hopefully they'll give more to provide more of that. Or what I see happening too is that I think there's going to be a lot of partnerships potentially between a nonprofit and even a nonprofit to form something different, to partner on something, or to focus on a specific product line or service a little bit more, other than just stuff around them. So you see that right now with a lot of nonprofits. You see a lot of nonprofits that they're not necessarily converting their existing brands into something new, but they're starting a social enterprise business that attaches to their main organization with a specific intent of generating revenue for the nonprofit. And so I think that a lot of nonprofits kind of see with funding models kind of drying up, and it's harder to get money, there's not enough to go around, et cetera, et cetera. They're going to have to diversify. And so for a lot of nonprofits, this is probably their future, I don't think it will be for all of them. Because again, some of the bigger nonprofits that have been around for a long time, they already are social enterprise businesses, you know. Google's another good example. They've been around since 1920. They are the example of social enterprise. They're one of the only ones for many, many years. So I think there's more that we'll see in that regard. But yeah, we're not talking about just corporate social responsibility here. This is something separate and different. But at the same time, I think that giving from those larger organizations, that's going to change too. What that entails and how that looks like, it's going to be interesting to see what happens because it's going to change as well. All right. Well, thank you very much.
I'm going to invite our panelists to come up. I'll start the cards around here in a second. I know we have some more folks joining us around 4:45-ish, so I didn't want to miss anyone. But I'm the Director of Business Relations at the Better Business Bureau, and I've had the pleasure of working with Jonathan for several years on a social enterprise, which you'll get to hear more about here in a second. So you've got Jonathan that'll continue on the panel. He did social enterprise with Aspen Point for about 14 years. Probably we'll talk a little bit about that. We've got Mr. Jeff Zierfoss, who is with Common Cause Catering and Local Relic. He does beer. For those of you that are...
That's what you need to know. Yeah. End of bio.
Remember the popular one tonight.
Yeah.
And then Mr. Jacob Eigengreen, who is a local and started his own international social enterprise, but has come back to now be the ED of the Quad for the time being while that is continuing to launch overseas. And so I'm going to let each of these guys tell you a little bit about their background, guys, 8 to 10 minutes, somewhere around there, and just talk about your social entrepreneurship life and trends and where you want to go from here. So, Jonathan, you want to go first? You want to take a break?
Yeah, go for it.
I'll be quick because you heard the B2B stuff, but just really quickly on my social entrepreneur side. I worked for a company, local nonprofit here in town called Aspen Point, and I was the vice president of Aspen Point Enterprises. And so, of course, for 14 years, I got to build and develop a number of different social enterprise businesses. So by the time I left Aspen Point, I think there's about 12 that we had designed and developed. One of those, which is still around and still a lot, you see a lot of communities, Aspen Point Cafe. That's just a cool example because we had a cafe that actually trained people to put them back to work. We work with low-income families, we work with veterans, we work with people with disabilities, at-risk youth, etc. We had a cool contract with a company to do barista training program. We built a geodesic dome and we started growing our own food. We taught students how to grow food, how to make stuff from scratch, which is going to get you a higher-paying job. But everything we do is pretty much a job creation social enterprise. There's lots of different versions of what it is, but we were able to do a lot of those and help get people with GEDs and plug them back into the workforce. So that's what I did before I came here to B2B, but definitely can still kind of categorize myself as a social entrepreneur.
Yeah, you had the bug.
Yeah, exactly.
So my name is Jeff. I also have the bug. I have a degree from Penn State in hotel and restaurant management, focused in culinary and finance, and most of an engineering degree. People always told me I would be either the most social engineer or the nerdiest restaurant guy. The truth is probably exactly between those two. I moved to Colorado 11 years ago, got a job at the Broadmoor, thought that was the place where I wanted to spend my career. It is, I will say this, in all seriousness, it is the best resort in North America. They are, hands down, just out of this world spectacular. They do great things for the individuals that come there on vacation. Some of the other areas didn't necessarily scratch the itch that I was looking for as far as making a difference in the community, doing the right things by their employees and whatnot. So I knew, I figured out within a couple of years that wasn't where I wanted to spend my career, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. So we jokingly tell people, although it's not really a joke, that we started a catering company by accident, and we really did. I was running the cafe, and still to this day run the kitchen at the Marion House every Wednesday. We feed 700 people from scratch, a completely volunteer-run kitchen. It's a pretty cool operation. I was doing that. They needed help with 1 or 2 evening catering things. I helped them with that. People came and they said, well, we love your food, we love your service, do you cater on site? I was like, well, gosh, I guess we could, why not? That being said, I never wanted to start a catering company. Still, to this day, 5 profitable, successful years in, still don't want to run a catering company.
Why not? It's easy.
Well, yeah. So, well, Yeah, no, you're right. It's totally easy. I pay people to do what I used to do. No, that's not true at all. But now we started a catering company by accident. That being said, I knew that catering wasn't where I wanted to be, and food service ultimately wasn't where I wanted to be. And so I didn't want to have a food company. I wanted to have a change the world company. And so Jonathan alluded earlier to the idea that there are people that are out there in the community that are doing this. They don't know what they're doing. They don't know that what they're doing is social enterprise. They've never heard of this market segment. And I really thought that was us. We thought we were a lot smarter than we were. We rather than just trying to figure out how to feed people, we wanted to try to figure out how to have a positive impact in the community. And so we developed this business model where rather than hiring people that I knew from the Broadmoor who had all of the experience, as a caterer we need people to cut onions and carry trays and wash dishes and load trucks and do all the things that caterers need. Wouldn't it be cool if we found people who could benefit from that experience and create a job training program to take people out of tough situations and help them attain self-sufficiency? And we thought we were so smart, and we went out, and so we started, and we were doing these catering events, and we were doing this stuff, and we were telling our story, and we were working with nonprofits. And I'll tell you what, I heard it 0 times until the first time I heard it, and then I heard it about 8 times in the next 8 days. And it was people saying, oh yeah, just like Robert Egger, just like DC Central Kitchen, just like this other kitchen, just like that other kitchen. And it should probably have taken a little bit of the wind out of my sails to discover that it wasn't as innovative as we thought it was. And instead, the exact opposite happened. I discovered that there was this whole community, this whole network of people who are out there who aren't, at the end of the day, they're sort of competitors, but in the world of social impact where everybody's trying to have the best positive social impact that they can, it's much less about competing and much more about helping everybody. They understand in these different communities, I can help people in Colorado Springs that they can't necessarily help in LA or Seattle or Washington, D.C. or wherever it may be. And so these guys will just open their books. They say, here, do you need training materials? Do you, what's your schedule of accounts? Can you match this up against that? How does it all work? And it's such a cool community to be a part of. So it's funny, Jonathan talked about the nonprofit versus the for-profit. If you look at us from a job training and job creation side, we look an awful lot like a nonprofit. We have 2 great nonprofit partners in town. One is Partners in Housing, the other is Catholic Charities in the Marion House. And we do a lot of job training and not even job training, life skills training, working with individuals who are coming out of homelessness and domestic abuse situations, teach them how to shop at a grocery store on a budget, how to do nutrition and meal planning, and feed your kids healthy food that they don't necessarily know is healthy so that you can kind of trick them into eating healthy, all those kind of things. If you also look at us from the for-profit side, we look an awful lot like a for-profit. If you have a wedding or graduation party or a nonprofit fundraiser, whatever it may be, and you're looking for a catering company, you call us and we look like any other for-profit catering company out there. The reality is that we're somewhere in the middle. We're registered as an LLC. We are, nonprofit exists to make, a for-profit exists to make a profit for their shareholders, everybody else be damned. A nonprofit, loosely, except for the CSR piece. A nonprofit exists to change the community, to have a positive social impact. They traditionally rely on donors and government grants in order to fund their mission year after year. We're in the middle. So we're not a food company, we're a change the world company, but we do that by providing food services and charging for those food services. We provide a service that has a value. We charge for it the same way any other business would, but it's the marriage of the two. So we can't, I'm not out asking $4 so that I can teach people to cut onions. I'm booking catering gigs for which we need onions to be cut, and then I'm finding people who can benefit from the opportunities that I have cut those onions. So, I also have a beer company, we can talk about that too at some point.
After this at the beer place, right?
Yeah. Common Cause Catering is a social enterprise. Local Relic is our brewery. They're probably a social business. They're probably one click to the right. That's a little over a year old, and some of those ideas are still in development and rely on us having a building, which we do now. So we're getting closer to that dream.
We'll all come have a beer there.
Absolutely,
Right.
absolutely.
We'll all come support
Yeah.
the cause.
Well, my name is Jake. My story is, I'm going to frame slightly differently, mostly because I think I'm a little closer to college, and my story might be a little bit more relevant from how I got from college to where I am now. So I grew up here in Colorado Springs and graduated from Palmer High School downtown. Went to school out of state, but while I was at school, I started getting really, really frustrated by the academic focus on thinking and writing and never doing anything about it. So like, I had an opportunity to do some study abroad and to do some original research. Wrote a paper, everyone was super excited about it, and I thought I had come up with some really cool conclusions, and then I hit this wall of like, okay, cool, you published it, like, great, now what's the next thing you're gonna write on? And I was like, wait, I have done all of this work on this, I have this understanding of this problem, I have a handle on maybe something that might actually affect it. Isn't there a next step within the world of academia to act on it? And the answer for me was no. So I got really frustrated by academia. Instead of going to grad school, I decided I was going to go pursue entrepreneurship. Joined a fellowship called Venture for America, which is sort of like Teach for America, except for that it sends, instead of sending students from college to schools and districts that need them, it sends graduates to startups in cities that can use the talent. So cities like Detroit and New Orleans and Providence and Las Vegas. And it is very much so a nonprofit. It is not on the spectrum of social enterprise. They seek donations and they place students with startups, and these startups are traditionally very straight, cut and dry for-profit companies, very few social enterprises, a lot of tech companies. I worked for an urban development company in Las Vegas. Was really fascinated by this company because it was not branding itself as a social enterprise whatsoever. It was branding itself as a development company, as a for-profit development company. However, its work was rebuilding the very old part of downtown Las Vegas, which is blighted and full of just kind of decrepit old buildings, and there's a lot of social issues in the area, and it's just kind of your classic story of urban decay. So by the very act of investing in that area and investing thoughtfully, this business was promising to have an impact. Again, and I was completely new to the world of building businesses. I didn't really know how you went from an idea to incorporating a business to finding funding to actually starting to sell stuff. Like, at what point do you become legitimate to start being able to sell something to someone? Turns out there is no point, you just start doing it. It's true. It's a hustle. But I was really excited about the opportunity to go work for a company with a social impact that I could see. I ended up working for one arm of that company. We had divvied our funds up so that we had some money for real estate improvements, some money for business investment, some money for some other things, and I was working on the venture capital arm trying to invest in additional startup companies, locate them in our area to kind of catalyze a new economy, open upwardly mobile jobs for the community. It was pretty exciting stuff. And then I realized that this was a company full of just like straightforward business people. These were former executives from the Bellagio and former tech executives running this thing. So they were very focused on the bottom line. And so we never actually figured out how to revitalize an area because we were so focused on, okay, where's the like profit in this? We were doing, right? The mantra of entrepreneurship is, move fast and break shit. It's something that Facebook used to say. And we were so focused on the moving fast and the breaking things, the moving fast and the breaking things, that we never actually got to thinking about how do we actually achieve this vision that we've set out. So I got frustrated. The company ended up folding, and I moved on to try and start my own company in East Africa. And first I sought academic research funding to go launch a pilot. And I tried to build the company not from the perspective of what's the for-profit side and the non-profit side, but just how can I do all of the things at once? And we're still very much so in the process of that. Jonathan, you mentioned microfinance. We are a microfinance company, but we don't do loans. We actually offer equity investment products. We're the first company that I'm aware of in East Africa, but I'm sure once we get a little bigger, I'm going to start hearing about all the other people doing this. Where 90% of the investment capital in the United States used to start companies, whether it's small or large, is attached to an equity investment product. So that's cash. The investor is basically buying a piece of your company. 99-point-something% of the investment capital available in the developing world is associated with loans, meaning you start paying next week or at the end of the month. The loans don't have grace periods, they have high interest rates, microfinance has lowered those interest rates and made them more accessible, but it hasn't really gotten to the point where you can take a risk and start a business that's more complex than reselling some produce or reselling some used shoes. So we built out an equity investment framework that theoretically will allow entrepreneurs to take more risks, build larger businesses that add additional value, diversify their economies, and then those are profitable businesses, so we profit from it. So I have no idea where I end up on the spectrum of nonprofit to for-profit and the social enterprise term for what we do, but it was very much so just I was acting out of frustration in spite of the academics seem to have all the answers in my experience, but don't do anything about it. The entrepreneurs seem to be doing way too much and not paying attention to any of the answers. And how can I live in the middle of those two worlds, think about what I'm doing, act on those thoughts, talk with a lot of people who can tell me I don't know what I'm doing, and pick holes in everything I'm doing, and just try and achieve some kind of impact and not have to pay for my own plane tickets.
Kind of just get it done.
Yeah.
Continue.
Exactly, yeah, somewhere on there, it's just like, just do it. Thank you.
So that's a great segue to kind of my first question, and you guys definitely feel free to jump in as well, but how do you balance the social and the entrepreneur? How do you find the middle ground in those two things? Because to your definition, sometimes they are at odds with each other of how those two sectors have typically grown up.
Sleep less.
Sleep less, drink more beer.
I'll kind of tell you one kind of story is that, interestingly enough for me, my degree and my background is in psychology. And so I have a master's degree in psychology, and this is one of those interesting stories, I think, in the regard of, I don't want to realize I have this entrepreneurial gene, but I was doing the psychology work, and I was doing that on that side for the people, kind of the traditional nonprofit, and found out that, hey, you can kind of combine these two together. And so now I kind of, straddle both of those worlds, and so it is something that, I think it's at odds a lot of times, because sometimes there are things that you can do, especially in the catering world, and you know this, that you can do something that will make you more money on this side, but it will be so at the direct, cost of, the mission you can provide people. And so sometimes you can do things for the mission that will kind of create more value over here, but it's going to cost you more money. So, they're always kind of in balance, and so I think what you really kind of got to remember is, that those things kind of come together and they got to work together. And then when you're ramping up a business, a social impact business, the first and primary thing is going to be to make money so the thing doesn't die. A lot of people will mess that up. So you hear people that talk about, we're going to employ 90% of the disabled population in the social enterprise from day one, because that's why we created it. And we'll tell people, no, ratchet that back. That's where you'll end up maybe in 2 years. Start at like 20%. It's okay. You'll get there. But if you start out pure mission, then you're gonna run into problems. If you start out pure profit and don't do any mission, then you can't call yourself one of these businesses. So you got to kind of find that balance of the two. But the other thing that I would say I do constantly is I'm talking to people. I'm kind of checking in with folks. I'm doing research. I'm reading stuff. There's new stuff that's coming out on this all the time. I would say 10 years ago, I could probably tell you that I probably read all the material that existed at the time. Now, like any other subject, there's more than there for 3 or 4 lifetimes that you'd have to kind of catch up on. So there's always new stuff. There's always good stuff. Learn from people. I think you got to pay attention and kind of figure out what's working well over here, what's not working well. You're always changing. You're always modifying. You got to remember that balance between the two. But for me, it's just checking with people.
When we've gone through sort of different growth curves and life cycles, there have been points where things are stable, things are good, it's high season, there's lots of job training opportunities, and it's about making as big an impact as we can, make it while the sun shines. And then there are times where we're in a growth cycle, and so I'm a serial entrepreneur, and so we're always trying to find some, what's the next thing to try to have more impact, to try to grow, to try to spin off new ventures. And so sometimes as we go through a growth cycle, that emphasis on making a difference in the community and having a positive social impact never goes away. There's never a point where we're making zero positive impact, but there are points where our focus may be a little bit more on profitability, or our focus may be a little bit more on social impact. It seems a lot of times those are outside those influences are outside of our control. It's us reacting to the business climate, us reacting to the seasonal nature of our businesses, and just trying to keep the lights on. You know, at the end of the day, if we make it to the end of the quarter and don't have enough to pay our people, that's bad. If we make it to the end of the quarter and we have too much money in the bank, then we look at it as an opportunity where we didn't do enough to have a positive social impact. And so it's a balancing act for sure. It is harder. I am confident that it is harder to run a social enterprise than it is to run a regular small business, in part because of that straddle. At the same time, I will answer one of the questions earlier. We are a case study of one, but I would say that we have been more successful as a social enterprise than we would have been otherwise. It's a cool story. People like to tell our story for us. There's a lot of marketing value in it, and I can reinforce in real hard numbers and on my case study of one, a lot of the data that Jonathan had up on the slide, that people are willing to spend more. They are willing to trade away from a favorite brand to spend dollars with a local company that has a positive social impact.
I mean, I agree with everything you guys are saying in terms of it being a balancing act. My perspective on this is definitely from we're operating in a market that doesn't have the luxury of being able to choose whether they pay $1 or $2 for their product. In Uganda, the average incomes are under $2 a day, and we're selling. One of the businesses we've invested in is flour, corn milling. So they take the corn, they mill it into flour. Pretty straightforward. Our ownership structure is more complex because we're trying to leave local ownership in the hands of a local co-op. We're basically paying employees to do what owners typically do because we partnered with a co-op. If we were in the American environment or in a developed market where there was more flexibility in terms of spending habits, I think we would probably also be a case study in exactly proving what your point was earlier, Jonathan, about how people do prefer to be able to buy things that they are not just satisfying their needs, they're satisfying somebody else's needs. But also from the perspective of balancing the social and the financial, it's a day-by-day balancing act, in much in the same way that you guys have mentioned. I'm personally super fascinated by the concept of a B Corp, which Jonathan mentioned is a legal entity that you can form, a regular corporation, LLC, or there are various different types of corporations you can form, which is the legal thing that your company is. It's the one that pays taxes. It's the thing that has to go to court if you're sued, those kinds of things. In the articles of incorporation, in a traditional company, it says we exist to make money, basically. And a B Corp says we exist to make money and something else. So you basically define this entity's existence as being more than just making the money. And that's what it's like in my brain as I try and navigate the marketplace that is Uganda, and the fact that we're currently having to buy our input corn at twice what we were expecting because of the drought years, and we're having to sell our flour at half of what we were expecting because we're competing with these vertically integrated businesses in the capital city run by, they're called business conglomerates. Here we probably call them organized crime. That we don't have to go there. But they're able to pay their employees nothing, produce flour very cheaply, ship it to the area where we operate, and we're trying to pay a living wage and to have profits to distribute both to my company and to the leadership of the cooperative to then be distributed to the members. So it's just like, in my mind, I just have to think about exactly as a B Corp says, of we exist to make money. If we can't make money, we won't be able to do this other thing, but we exist to do this other thing also. So at every decision you have to, it is harder. You just have to think through that and be sure it's not just, profits are increasing, check. It's profits are increasing, okay, well I just had to cut my employee salary by X percent, and that's not going to cut it. That's, we don't exist to do that.
Now, are you guys familiar with the B Corp and the B Corp legislation? Anybody? I see one yes. Okay, yeah, so the thing that makes it really cool, to expand a little bit on what you said, I'm excited because there have always been those two big circles at the end, and for all of these companies in the middle, there is a really good framework. And B Corp starts to be what I want it to be.
Yes.
I'm looking for like one click on this side of the nonprofit. But the thing that makes a B Corp really cool is, so I mentioned earlier, a for-profit exists to make profit for shareholders, everybody else be damned. up into the point that the board and the C-level employees can actually get sued for doing something that is not in the best fiduciary interest of their shareholders. And so if you have, if you make widgets, I hate picking on real companies. They're bigger
Been
than
doing
me.
Tesla for a while.
No, he's bigger than me too. If I am the CEO of a big company and I decide, you know what, I want to pay my people 20% more because I understand that, you know, traditionally a for-profit company pays their employees exactly what they need to and not $1 more. I want to pay them 20% more because we're profitable.
Unless you're CEO, and the CEOs.
Oh, yeah.
We won't go there.
Yeah, they so I decide I want to pay my employees 20% more. The shareholders can come back and I personally can be sued because I decided to pay my employees more. And that just seems terrible. And so the idea of the B Corp is that I can say, well, no, it's built into our mission and our corporate charter is that I want to make a profit for my shareholders, but I also want to take good care of my employees. I also want to take good care of the environment. So when we come back and say, okay, well, we want to phase out using this certain chemical because it's bad, we want to use this other chemical because it's biodegradable, but it costs 30% more. I am now protected as the board and the C-level and the decision-making entities from shareholder lawsuits.
So Patagonia is a really good example. This is something most of us have heard of Patagonia. Yvon Chouinard, who's the founder, started the company back in, I think, '73, was getting ready to retire. He was the first in line to sign up for the Public Benefit Corporation and to certify to them both in California. So he's the first public benefit corporation in California. He did it because he wanted to, really make sure that, he couldn't get sued for doing this. But I mean, obviously, his stakeholders were really, they understood what it meant. He wanted to protect his legacy, so he knew that when he was going to retire, if he left, then if somebody decided, the board decided to sell the company, they would sell to, the highest bidder. But then they wouldn't be able to necessarily, maybe they would be able to keep all the social benefit that kind of went with that and the environmental benefit, all the hard work. So if they sold the company and they sold to somebody else, they could say, you know what, stop all this environmental stuff because you're wasting money. We're just going to keep that little Patagonia brand and sell as many jackets as we can. So he didn't want that to happen. So when he switched that to this different structure, it essentially wrote into law into their charter, as you mentioned, that that's what they had to do. And so it was a matter of, we want to make money for our shareholders, but up to 10% of what they do has to be donated. And so they want to give back to the community. So it wrote it and they protected it. So now he retired. So if they sell that company to somebody else buys it, they have to do that. They have to do the environmental stuff. They have to do the social stuff that goes with it. So I think also it's interesting too, is an interesting trend is that you're going to see a lot of companies that are not necessarily interested in being traded on the stock market. It used to be a badge of honor to be traded on those things, and you got more and more people that are not. Like it, don't trust them, whatever the reason is, I don't know. But it's kind of this trend. And even, New Belgium's a good example of a company where they're 100% employee owned. And so whether they retain with a single owner or a lot of people are going to this, employee owned, reduces turnover, you have higher wages, you have better product, better culture, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. People aren't doing that anymore. So there's a group, this is interesting, we'll see what happens with this. There's a group talking about creating a long-term stock exchange. So you have the traditional one that's over here where it's about, short-term, quick gains over time. But again, that could lead to, I'm not saying it does, it could lead to, areas where you might cut corners. You're just trying to maximize profit just for profit's sake. I think that's what got us into the debacle of 2008, is that making profit just for profit's sake creates problems. And by the way, the world's only so big. You can't have 50% growth every single year forever. It doesn't work that way. So now that we're going to maximize, Africa can only grow in so many parts of the world, right? They're into China now and India. Then what? When you maximize that, then what? So what will be interesting to see is that this long-term market, this long-term stock exchange makes up any popularity will be people can buy and trade on that stock exchange, but they're trading in these businesses that take a little bit longer to mature because they have this longer type of mission. But at the same time, it's not going to be maximized at the higher profit margin either. I think what will need to happen too is the definition of success in business will change. It's already changing. It's not just about profit maximization. It's about making money, to keep the lights on, as you pointed out. But it's also going to be about, from a success standpoint, what are you doing in terms of giving back to your community and your society? And at a conference I was at, and Gina was there as well, we were talking about, well, what will this look like even from an accounting standpoint? Because, you get what you track, right? You get what you reward. And if it's just all about, from an accounting standpoint, because the nonprofits do it too, use the same, it's similar. Accounting, when you do it from for-profit about what does that look like at the end of the day, net profit, does it make money or not make money? That's part of the equation when you're talking about this. There's something out there called double bottom line accounting. There's other practices that are coming to the table as well, where you're tracking your net profit, what your dollar amount that you're making, but also what's your benefit. What are you giving back? Or what did you create? What value did you develop? There's something that we like to talk about too called social return on investment, SROI. What is that? How do you track that? How do you measure that? There's more benefit than just making money if you're giving somebody a job, if you're creating impact for people. There's multiple things you can measure. So just measuring it from a bottom line standpoint from your accounting document, it needs to be more, it needs to be another line, maybe even a third. So it's all changing, is my point. It's all for grabs. You're going to hear more and more about this stuff in the future.
That's what that was one of the challenges with all this Wells Fargo stuff that's come out. Is that when you hold people accountable solely on how many new accounts you can open, and you financially incentivize them to open new accounts, they're going to figure out how to open new accounts, and they did, and look where it got them. And so, yeah, I think you're right, and I don't know that there's a great tool. I think it's kind of a one-size-fits-one model right now to figure out how to track those things. Because when you can track them, and you can measure them, and you can reward your people on them, and you can demonstrate to your consumers and your potential investors what all those positive numbers are, you're sort of cementing that. It's no longer about like, well, we feel good and we do job training. It's like, well, let me show you how many hours of instruction I've provided. Let me show you how many people are self-sufficient because of the work that we've done, that kind of thing.
I think the lady right behind you there.
Sure, that's correct. Go ahead. I wanted to ask a question. You guys who mentioned that you like the idea of benefit corporations. I'm assistant professor at the communication department and I study them. And I totally understand when you say those are fascinating companies to look into where you're coming from. The energy is amazing, the movement is gaining traction. There is a lot to learn from them and to actually see that it makes business sense. It doesn't make just social sense, it makes perfect business sense. So I wanted to ask you, are you planning to join the movement? Are you planning to become a benefit corporation? And if not, why?
Well, I have no idea yet, honestly, because right now my company's incorporated in Uganda, and they don't have B Corp. No, Uganda.
Oh, Uganda.
East
They
Africa.
don't?
Yeah, they don't have that legislation in place yet. That company is owned by an American entity, which could become a B Corp. Right now, I'm still proving that the product works, and pursuing academic funding as a way to do a little bit more messing around and experimentation before I have to start worrying about equity and that kind of thing. And because of that, it's afforded me the luxury of not having to decide yet. My dream scenario is that we get one step beyond B Corp by the time that this is ready to be incorporated in a really formal sense. But I think with the options on the table now, that would probably be the avenue that I would pursue. But that's hypothetical.
What are you registered as right now?
It's an LLC in Colorado that holds the Ugandan entity. Yeah.
So we are, and ours is a little more complex because our lawyer needs to get paid. But it's very nice. You can tell him that if he asks. That I say good things about him. So we are a Colorado LLC that is in turn owned by an umbrella company that is a Wyoming LLC because their asset protection and trust protection is a little bit stronger. Because we have we have different LLCs in different silos, and so we want to be able to protect them from each other, in a sense. We will not pursue B Corp. So I want to be clear on this. You're asking about a public benefit corp, which is the legal
Yes, object
entity.
certification.
And so there's the legal entity, which is a benefit corporation, and there is the company that Jonathan mentioned that's called B Labs that provides a certification of social enterprises and social impact businesses. So I told you the distinction to tell you that we will join probably neither. We will not pursue B Corp legislation in my mind because it's not the right fit for us, generally speaking. More specifically, I feel like B Corp is really targeted at the traditional C Corps, like big corporate entities that either have a really robust corporate social responsibility piece or are kind of the next level of that, like the Patagonias, like the socially minded businesses. The protections that are afforded to them don't help us at all. We don't have a board, we don't have C-level employees that have to answer to shareholders because we don't have shareholders. And so on just a very generic sense, it would cost us money to convert, both in the lawyer fees and everything else to be able to file the paperwork, but it also, I think anyway, means that you have to opt into classifying as a C Corp instead of an S Corp. And as an LLC, you get to choose, and it's a better, she's not again, thank you. And so it doesn't make sense for any of our businesses, because none of them are on that scale. We won't pursue the B Corp certification from B Labs, in part because it costs money and I'm not sure what the upside of it is. And I don't, well, it's complicated, and I'm happy to have you come down to the kitchen. I will show you the work I do firsthand, rather than pay somebody from there to get on a plane, to fly here, to see the work that we do, say, okay, cool, you pass, here's a stamp, you can put it on your website. Like that's just...
There's consultants in Colorado that will charge you $2,500 just to go through the process of applying for it, not even getting it, just helping you figure it out.
I think you raise a really important point about like the scalability, and this gets into corporate law, and we don't really need to go there, but I mean, there are so many different corporate structures that you can use and incorporation structures that you can use, and it all comes down to what are you trying to do, and does it matter? I think like you're right on, because if this product in Uganda is proved feasible and proves like it's going to work, my goal is to scale it and to build a large company out of it. That's the dream. But that means that affords me a different perspective on B Corp and that kind of thing, and it's a really important distinction to draw, that when you're small in a sole proprietorship or when there aren't shareholders that you have to worry about liability from, the incorporation piece of it isn't really that important because you're the owner, you're the boss, you can do whatever you want.
It actually hurts you on taxation.
Yes, exactly.
But here's something else to think about. This is something that our lawyer BB talked about in terms of just giving you a quick example of when you look at the designations that are out there. So if you look at corporations, they've been around for thousands of years. Like the first one go back to like 528 AD or something like that. And when you look at nonprofits, they're about 500 years old. And you look at the public benefit corporation model, we're talking 2013, 2010. So when you look at how long they've been around, that's one thing. But her point was, Jonathan, just be aware that companies have been around since with the Greeks all the way to the current kind of era, and all the time in between, it's a lot of lawsuits, and you figure things out, and people get sued. And so we kind of got the for-profit thing kind of figured out, kind of got the nonprofit one figured out. We're not quite sure about this, but you're drawing from the body of knowledge for this. So, and she said, I'm encouraged by this. It'd just be interesting to see what happens when somebody gets sued and how it changes it eventually.
One other point I want to make real quick before you guys jump in and tell us to stop talking, is I think it's a good question and a smart question, and it's I think most of the people that are driving these social-minded businesses and the social entrepreneurs don't necessarily have the body of knowledge to be able to ask these questions. If they do know to ask them, they don't necessarily know how to interpret the answers or how to make the best decisions on them. And at the end of the day, as entrepreneurs, we tend to like to move fast and break shit, like you said. And so, sometimes it's figure out how to have an impact and sort of figure out the framework for that impact after the fact. And so that's part of what I'm really excited that CCSI is doing, and what Jonathan and Stacey are doing, is helping to provide some educational framework to be able to help people answer these questions early on in their business, instead of waiting until they're a year in or 3 years in to say, oh, well, gosh, we didn't really know what we were doing. We just opened a bank account to try to prove the concept. Turns out we proved the concept, and now we're 3 years in, and we're trying to go back retroactively and figure out how to answer all these. I'm excited that there's a resource that's being built to help people on the front side.
And for BBB, we're going to try to meet with B Labs and potentially partner as well.
It's funny you say open a bank account, because that is legitimately how I incorporated. Was I had to open a bank account, and they were like, you can't have an LLC first.
Yeah, so you're going to say, it's already saved, there's your 30 bucks.
Done.
Okay, we're going to take one more quick question.
Yeah, please.
Great question. So I'm struck by the fact that we have an all-male panel speaking to the majority female audience. And my question is, what is the BPD gonna do about that?
Well, actually, Stacy, you gonna take that, because we were organized by female.
I'll answer that question. Yes, we did reach out to a couple, and unfortunately they were not available this evening. We ended up with some really great panelists. The focus for me putting together the panel was in getting a rich distribution of social enterprise experience tonight, and so in looking at that around our community, it was a blend of both, but we had these fabulous gentlemen show up tonight and be able to represent that. So yes, there are social entrepreneur women in our community doing really great work, but they're busy running social
And
enterprises.
Stacy's one of them, she just didn't want to be up here, so.
Well, just to add to that, in straight for-profit entrepreneurship, the ratio is something like 80% male of founders and CEOs and executive level. And I don't know the percentage in social enterprise offhand. I know it's at least double that, a lot closer to equitable than it's not there yet. But as a sector, there's a far better gender distribution.
I want to say it's like 60%. I mean, I think it's a majority. Higher. Is it?
65.
There you go.
Well, good questions all. Thank you for coming. And please help us thank our panelists. Jonathan Liebert, Jeff Zirkus, I probably said that wrong, and Jake Eichengreen, and also Stacy Burns from the